Thank you. And I think the last piece of our budget just demonstrates that we believe we need to listen to the residents of Connecticut. All too often, we hear the frustration and anger over the unaffordability of our state. And we should be taking that money from New York, who is unfairly taxing our own residents who are working in the state of Connecticut. And if we do that, we should be asking the general public, what do you want to see in tax relief? And that is what we're doing. We're giving that option to the general public. If we could get the $320 million back online, what tax relief would you like to see? And I'd finally like to point out that that proposal is not, that money is not relied upon in our budget proposal. So we are balanced without it. And with that, I'd be happy to answer any questions.
The savings from state employees, obviously, they have contracts in place for their wages. Are you concerned that you won't get those savings if they don't agree to a pay freeze?
So in the past, the state of Connecticut has employed in times we could suspend arbitration. We would just have to pass the wording that says we are suspending arbitration for 26 and 27, and then we can achieve those savings.
But I mean, if they were to challenge that, saying, you know, this is to create tax cuts and funding elsewhere, and they would challenge maybe perhaps we're not in an emergency, do you think that would hold up? Are you concerned?
There's legal precedent to do that nationwide. It's been done. And I think it's frustrating when you have a governor that is willing to say that under his watch he's always going to give raises to our state workers while the rest of the residents of Connecticut hasn't seen those raises. We think 33% raises over the last 5 years is plenty, and it's excessive. And it's about time we prioritize the residents of Connecticut and not our state workers. So I don't think it's unreasonable to ask them to go 2 years without increases. They can live off of the 33% increases that they've seen.
In government inefficiencies, have you identified where those savings would come from?
Absolutely. As I said, I did a 3-year analysis of all of the spending. I'm an accountant by trade, and there's not nearly enough accountants in this building. I looked at the 3-year spending at a line item level for every department in the state of Connecticut. On average, there's a low year is we have about $280 million in excess costs built into the budget. So what we did is we looked line by line. Some areas that were easy to identify, other areas were in the other expense line item. So we took a 5% cut. It's $33 million-ish dollars. It's extremely generous. When you have $300 million left on the table at the end of every year, we're saying less than 30 million of that is attributable to items that we could look at and say you just need to live within your budget.
Tammy, could you comment on the deputy commissioner positions, and also do you have an estimate for what the average residential electric bill would go down, how much they'd save a year or a month?
Yeah, so one of the things that we're also doing in our budget is we're eliminating all secondary and tertiary deputy commissioners. It ends up being about 17 head count, I believe. And that's just because, again, government has gotten kind of fat. And I think it's time to trim. So we can manage these areas with one commissioner and not with, one and a deputy commissioner or 2 deputy commissioners. And I'm sorry, the second part of your question? Electricity. So I'm just going off of a general, right? The amount of money that we're looking right now to reduce would be about 25% of the public benefit fee. So it really depends. I think Vinny might have some more specifics.
Yeah, so I think it's a little bit of a moving number because the public benefit charges is a percentage of your bill. So when you think about the commercial industry, which last year paid $500 million of that public benefits charge, which I think is more than 50%, that certainly is going to reduce their bills significantly. Overall, the range is between $10 and $20 for the average household per month to reduce their bills with this proposal.
I would like to add, though, on top of that, as I mentioned before, Eversource had a $275 million that they were trying to give back to residents. And PURA has decided they're only going to give back, I think, $147 million or something like that. That $225 million, or $275 million at the time, they were saying was estimated to lower bills between $20 and $40 depending on your usage. So if you look back at that number and then you look at what we're offering, and I think they ended up saying the $147 million was going to be around $13 on average. So if they got that 13 plus ours, you'd be looking at a good chunk of that public benefit fee, which I think is very important to people right now. It is still one of the top things that we're hearing about, and that's why it is just such a miserable fail that none of it is adjusted in the governor's or in the appropriations budget at all. The number one thing people are screaming about has been ignored, kind of like us. So, we're not ignoring it anymore.
The 900 million under the spending cap in the second year, obviously, I'm sure you'll expect a lot of groups saying we could use a chunk of that. So what's the rationale that, at least for now, just not?
You have to look at it in its totality. This is not just about spending up to the limits. It is about sustainability. And when we see the consensus revenue yesterday that is showing another downgrade, the sales tax trends have been down for well over a year. People that have businesses in this state realize that the economy has been soft for well over a year. Democrats want to just blame President Trump's tariffs. We sort of see a bigger challenge ahead of us, and that is why we're not going to spend up to these caps. And we've also left room in our revenue to address the downturn in our consensus revenue.
My grandmother used to always tell me, just because you can doesn't mean you should, right? So having that money there available, it's there if we need it. We also have revenue that would be available if we need it, but just because you can doesn't mean you should.